Welcome to the MSDW Podcast. I'm Jason Gumpert, editor at msdynamicsworld.com, and this episode is all about one company's approach to training Dynamics 365 for finance and operations users. My guest, Elif Item, has worked with AX and D365FO for more than a decade and recently took her years of consulting and project-based work and translated them into a new company, Item by Item, and a product of sorts, a video-based training platform designed to offer smaller, more digestible units of educational content for the users at companies deploying D365FO. We talked to Elif about her history in the Dynamics channel, her new company, and what D365FO customers' training needs really are. Okay, Elif Item, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I wanted to have you join us. I was interested because your focus is all on training, and we're going to talk about what you've been up to, what some of the work that your company has been doing, and some of the types of companies that really need training. I thought maybe we could start by just having you give a little bit of a summary of sort of how you arrived at this point working in the Microsoft Dynamics AX 365 finance operations ecosystem. What have you done before your current company, Item by Item, and sort of how did you get to this point?
Yeah, sure. Actually, it is kind of an interesting story how I started D365 finance and operations journey. At the time, it was AX 2.5, and immediately after that, it was upgraded to AX 3.0. And I had just recently had a baby, and I was staying home and taking care of the baby, but I had a full-time employee before that, and I just started to get a little bit antsy and bored at home, and I found out about this new product, and it was going to be the new big ERP in the ERP space. And I started to really spend some time and learn it the old school way, installed AX into one of the computers in the house, and then downloaded the books and started to study it. And sure enough, in the next 6 to 8 months, I started to get all of the certifications, and I was master certified 8 months after that, completing all the certifications. And somehow the opportunity, hit, and there were a couple of new clients in Dallas area who needed some support. And I actually started my AX career in the support area, especially in the finance and trade and logistics. Then as my kids got older, I started to work in projects full-time, first as consultants, then as project managers and project manager, and ultimately I became the director of consulting for one of the consulting firms in the D365 space, and I did that in total of almost 15 years. Gaining a lot of experience about not only the product, but also how it is used, how it is taught to the end users, and how the managers look at the product from the perspective of, changing the day-to-day lives of end users. And even before the D365 world, I was always very passionate about training. I had done training before that. And when I started to work in the consulting world and became the director, I was also responsible from training the consultants, not only on the product, but also some consulting skills. So I always had a really passion about teaching, learning, really better understanding all of the theories about learning. And also throughout these years, the end users and the consultants, a lot of the, I don't want to say personalities have changed, but the demographics of our end users and also consultants have changed. So with that, I felt like it was time for me to go back into my passion and my roots and really work on a tool that can provide online training to this new modern learner group that are much more used to using, mobile devices, online training, that are a lot more worried about time, and also they want quickly be able to have access to what they're looking for. So that's how kind of the item by item journey started, and it's been just great success so far. Very, very excited about it.
Excellent. And yeah, just to say, maybe explain to our listeners a little bit more, the platform you're talking about is very much kind of a on-demand learning management type of solution or platform that end users can access, as well as what managers and more like power users and site owners for your clients as well. And these are D365 finance and operations customers.
Yes, that's correct. So when we approach to this new modern learner in the D365 finance and operations workspace, we wanted to come from three different pillars. The first one was the access. We wanted to make sure that the learners, which are primarily end users and sometimes subject matter experts and the core team members, obviously, we wanted them to have 24/7 access easily wherever they are. So they don't just need to be able to do it in one place, but they should be able to do it at home or in a cafe. And the classroom trainings a lot of the time restrict, obviously, how the learners can have access to the materials. But that was number one, that we really wanted to make sure that the access is taken care of. And number two was to making the content a lot more consumable. A lot of the times you go to a classroom and it's several hours, and at the end you may not be able to retain most of that information because of the length of time it has taken the instructor to cover all of those materials. What we wanted to do is to really implement a microlearning strategy and split the materials into small chunks. And that way, the learners don't have to go through several hours of materials, but instead they consume as much as they need. Today, they may go 20 minutes. Tomorrow, they may go 25 minutes. And the day after, they may just only watch one video that's few minutes to find what they're looking for. And the third pillar was the ability to be able to take control and also be in charge of your learning as a learner, but also the managers to be empowered to see what everybody is doing. So because we built the content in a learning platform, the learners themselves are able to see their own progress, and they're able to see what they have accomplished. We have some achievements, badges, certifications in there for them to feel like they have progressed toward their ultimate goal. And similarly, the managers can see what each person is doing, and they can provide incentives, like maybe sending them messages or creating an environment where the end users can participate into some sort of a competition and encourage each other. All of these now give us ability to provide this material in a platform to the modern learner in a way that can be the biggest stepping stone in their learning journey for D365 finance and operations. Because, as you are very aware, implementing D365FO is a huge undertaking, and it's very stressful a lot of the times for the learners. They don't know what's going on, and it's very hard to, sometimes engage them in very periodic trainings and meetings. What this tool provides the management ability to continuously engage the learners this way, that you're aware their anxieties and what they're going through and what is easy and what's difficult, and you can easily take action towards that.
It sounds also like part of it is perhaps changing expectations from learners when it comes to how they're going to get their head around technology now. Like the idea of not having some kind of an on-demand, resource would perhaps seem strange, given what else they see in the context of how they consume applications in their personal life or in their professional life.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you look at some of the statistics out there, the amount of time people use on like looking for stuff. It's I think I've seen like 9 out of 10 times when someone is looking for new information, they're the first place that they go to is the search engine. So they are not really looking into some sort of an other place. So it's embedded in them, and we see it in our young kids. I mean, they're one step further. They're going to middle school with iPads, submitting assignments with all kinds of electronic portals and tools and apps. And maybe our current end user community and consulting communities is not as much as the middle school kids of today, but they're definitely up there as far as the expectations from their company, the type of training and type of support that the company is supposed to provide during this tremendous implementation. And that's exactly why we have taken this micro-learning approach, because when you create D365 materials that are large in chunk, it's very, very difficult to find what they're looking for. And it's important to make the materials skill-based, because if you, at the end of a 4-minute video, learn how to do an activity in D365, then you can consume that by itself. And what that gives you as a learner is that exact ability to search, is that if you want to know how to create an intercompany journal, you can just type that up, find that material, watch it, and be immediately able to go into your own instance and perform that activity. But if you had a much larger material that consisted of several chapters, then you would have to do something like finding what you're looking for in a textbook. You have to find the exact chapter, exact page, you have to read it and look for it. And all of these are one more step for the learner to give up, because what we want them to be truly engaged and what we want them to be a part of the process, we need to make it very easy for them to find information and be engaged. The more steps we add into this process, the more likely they're just going to give up and jump onto something else that they have to do as a part of their day-to-day job. I mean, you have to, when we look at our audience for the end users, it's very unlikely, although there are several projects that I've seen in my experience where the core team members are 100% on the D365 Finance and Operations project for that period of time, and that's all their job. But it's majority of the time, all of the core team members are actually doing their day-to-day job. In addition to their day-to-day job, they're part of this project. So it's important to make this very easy and very convenient for them and simple, so that we utilize every single hour that they're able to allocate to the project.
Do you find that from customer to customer, what they want out of training changes, or what they're asking from you or from maybe their primary implementation partner is going to be different for each on a customer by customer basis?
I definitely think so. I think one of the things that differs from customer to customer is when the training should start. There are some customers that are much more inclined to start the training as early as possible, and not necessarily start for a larger group, but start for a smaller group, and just keep that group going as the core group, and add and remove people from the bunch per se as the project is progressing. And that's generally what we recommend anyways. But we also work with a lot of customers that are much more, I would say, traditional approach to end user training, is that they'd like to wait until it's a little bit closer to go live. And they have some valid reasons for that as well. They don't want the learners to lose interest. They don't want learners to forget about things. And at the same time, it's also very common. Some things are never fully sorted out until really towards the end of the project. So therefore, they prefer to maybe just really look at training only from the core team perspective, but they don't really open it to a larger audience until, I would say, probably 4 months prior to go live. We also hear a lot of interest. That was something that I honestly was thinking that it would be possible, but I never thought that it would be this much of the primary topic of our conversations with the customers, is to use the platform to add their own materials to it. Because what we give ability to the customers is that we provide the content in these what we call as learning paths, which are consisted of multiple of these small videos that I mentioned before. And each learning path represents a position in the company. If you're an accounting manager, you have a learning path. If you're a shipping clerk, you have a learning path. And learners can go through multiple learning paths at a time. And almost every customer that we talk to, they're interested in either adding their own courses or creating their own learning paths and adding additional materials. And that's very, very encouraging in my opinion, because they understand that the training that we provide is not going to be sufficient, and it's never our I would say argument or selling point to our customers, is that online training is very important, but it's not, you cannot just do this training and boom, you can go live. I'm sure the D365 audience is aware that every customer changes D365FO slightly. So you're still going to have to fill in that gap. But what we provide is, by providing 60, 70, in some cases 80% of the training through online, we're offering to the companies the ability to focus on that gap. They will still have to do the work, but they can just primarily focus on that and then really do it well, to cover that 20, 30% for the end user community.
Yeah, and I suppose that's encouraging too, if you see that they're actually putting the time and effort into thinking about those, what are those 20 or 30%, and just thinking how can we invest in that in particular.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, and it's an education process, because when we engage with the customers, we have to really, and when they agree to use the online platform, we sit down and really look. We provide them materials to show them for each role what is that person is going to learn. We provide them almost like a dictionary or the textbook of everything that they're going to learn, and that makes it a little bit easier to discuss what is it they're going to not learn, or then they bring to the table. we've tremendously customized this area, for example, then we know that more work needs to be done in that particular functional area compared to others. And I mean, it's pretty standard. We know the generally customized areas or extended areas now in D365 Finance and Operations. It's very rare for a customer to, for example, touch much to the general ledger module. I mean, that's really frowned upon, and it's not recommended by Microsoft. So unless, other than some reporting and some inquiries, we generally know that area is going to be very close to covering maybe 95% of what the customer needs, versus maybe a sales order entry area is going to be, the customers will be much more inclined to extend that area and add additional fields and maybe some additional logic in the way that the sales orders are entered. So when we say, 70%, that doesn't necessarily mean for every functional area. So when you look into one, you will see maybe a much higher percentage than the other one. But we go through that process, and it's actually very telling to the customers as well, because it's kind of a sitting down and really tallying up what has been done in the project and what areas are the ones that we have to be a lot more careful than the others.
Well, that is actually kind of a good segue, I think, into one of the reasons that we're connected, which is the series of what we're calling the D365FO Diary that we've been now posted, I think, 5 or 6 segments of at this point. Yeah, I think 5.
Yes.
And it's been a lot of fun to be able to work with you on that. And, actually, I think a lot of what you've already sort of explained about your approach and what you observe is kind of reflected in some of those videos. And it began with, you kind of mapped it out for us, and as we sort of planned this, and it's a series of very short videos, probably even shorter than probably what a typical training video would be, and different, right? But sort of talking about starting from before the launch of a D365FO project, thinking about what you really need to do to plan for training. So the series runs from how to plan when you're a month out, how do you create comprehensive training plans, and then how do you even consider like classroom training. And I think there's even more perhaps that you could even do in this series in the future. But I was actually surprised that classroom training works into it, and there's really a lot of components of what a company is going to decide to do ultimately, right? Because they do in I guess in truth, they have a lot of options, from doing almost nothing and using, default documentation
Yes.
to full scale, customized development of training in classrooms and video and other, other virtualized perhaps approaches, right? So
Yes,
can you maybe
yes.
map out a little bit more of what that progression of sort of recommendations you've been making is in that series?
Sure. I mean, the idea behind this series was to give an idea to all of the audiences in the D365FO world, is the thinking process of different sort of people in the organization. Because when you look into a project manager in a D365FO project, that person's perspective is different than a subject matter expert's perspective, and worries and what's going to happen and how my world is going to change. I think that we started the series from a little bit more from the project manager's perspective, like you mentioned, is to think about that progression. Okay, now the project has started, things are going. So what do? I know this thing is coming in the future. We're going to go live at one point of time, and I'm going to have to make sure all of these people, will have to be trained and efficient and, really be able to perform the tasks of what their jobs require. what are some of the things I need to start thinking about? And I think that was the first set of videos that we've done, and it's in a diary format. We first talk about, like, the person is the project manager, and then she talks about where they are in the project and what she is worried about and what she can do to remedy that worry and move on to the next step. And we go through, first we have to think about who we need to train. Then we need to think about what do we need to train about, and then progression of that. What do I do? Do I, some of them use Excel spreadsheets, some use something else to go through that progression and finally being into the execution mode. On the other hand, some subject matter experts' perspective is different. This person is a core team member. He does not necessarily even have any training background, but let's say he's responsible from one of the functional areas, and now the project managers ask this person, okay, you need to be training this many people in this functional area. His worries are very different. So what do I do? How do I run a classroom training? What do I focus on? And we're going to do we will continue with that mindset, and we will even dive into, like, what kind of challenges do you have in a classroom, when you have a difficult student or when you have a difficult subject, because all of these are really a part of a complete package. What we call as a blended learning approach is that there is not a one size fit all type of approach. So you can, as a company, use bits of all of this information to figure out what best fits your needs. If you're a company with 20 employees and and you're doing a phase approach into D365, your perspective to training will be different than another company who's ultimately going to have 300 users in 5 different countries. So what we're providing with the FO Diary series is a general, more, I would say, I don't want to call it a hypothetical, but a little bit more also an academic approach of these are all the options that you have, and you can pick and choose to create your own, training plan by using all of these building blocks.
All right, it makes sense. And I guess one of the other things I wanted to kind of get a sense from you on is just find out what what you're seeing in the finance and operations landscape in terms of, you're talking to different kinds of customers, clients who are going live, who are preparing to go live. Have you seen any patterns, or have you seen any trends in terms of, what kinds of companies are getting up and running? Is it all over the place, or is it evolving in any certain way that you're able to see in terms of mid-market versus enterprise companies, or certain types of divisions, certain types of business units, anything like that?
I mean, one of the things that I'm actually interesting enough to that I didn't think would be case, or I didn't even occur to me, is that I'm just surprised how many government-related companies, they are not even companies, entities, are going through implementation and going live, like a county, government county management, or in a lot in Canada, in United States. And I think I think Microsoft also provides them maybe a different pricing point. I don't know that for sure, but I am just guessing by watching all of these government organizations. A lot of nonprofit organizations are also implementing D365. I mean, lately I think I could probably tell that I've seen a much higher percentage of these types of entities than I anticipated. From the mid-market side, I think I see a pretty decent, good number, and not as many large customers yet, although there are definitely some very big projects that are going on right now that are just going to take several years to complete. I mean, there's definitely a little bit of an anxiety about being on the cloud, not having on-premise type of approach to D365, but I'm also very optimistic about D365FO because I see customers really embracing it much more than I thought they would to be on the cloud and using Azure and all of that. They're truly embracing it. They really see the future there, and they're just very encouraged about ERP platform to move that direction. In addition to that, since I've been in the D365 space for much longer, 10 plus years, in the very old days of AX, the selling point of AX was how flexible it was for companies to change it. That's how it was sold. Microsoft encouraged customers to, change it any way you want. We give you the bones, and then you can change it to fit into your needs. And it's changed already, and it is changing on a monthly basis towards more standardized approach. And instead of really providing that kind of approach to the customers and saying, you can change it any way you want, is that Microsoft is really trying to put as much as possible the best practices into the tool and really encourage the customers to not change it as much. I think that is going to, in the long term, result in two main advantages. One is that's I think why we see the government entities in there, is that it's encouraging customers that have zero interest in modifying D365FO to implement it. So they're really approaching the implementation with the perspective of, I'm going to take this product and I'm going to do my best to make it fit to my business needs, or maybe the reverse is fit my business needs into the product, and I will use it the way it is, which is going to create an environment for me that's with the least amount of maintenance costs that I have. I think that opened up a huge new door for this product, where customers are super interested in just taking it and using it the way it is. And then the mid-market, I think, is going to be also interested for the similar reasons, maybe not doing zero enhancements, because that's usually not possible, but to still do minimal enhancements, which will ultimately result in much reduced maintenance costs for them. And hence, I think that's exactly why I feel very excited about providing online training for D365FO. And maybe 10 years ago, it was not the time, because, AX became something tremendously different from the starting point at the end of an implementation. But today, it's not like that. Today, it looks very, very similar, maybe just slightly modified than how the companies start at the beginning of the implementation. And I think this opens up opportunities for companies like us and other companies to provide services and products, because the product is what it's expected to be at the end.
So you can yourself or other companies who sort of work in this channel can have a little more confidence maybe on what they know that companies are going to ultimately be deploying? It won't be so radically different for each company anymore. Is that part of the?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think if I would have felt comfortable, I mean, when I was starting this company 5 years ago, how the AX was going to look. I mean, how we know how many changes AX, even the look and feel is different. So when I look at, all of our videos were talking about how, interactive and great, that all of that content is wonderful, but it looks a certain way. It looks D365. So tomorrow, and we anticipate some changes, don't get me wrong, and we're prepared for that. But all of a sudden, if Microsoft just takes a completely different approach, like it did a couple of years ago when they moved it to, to web format, then it's another, you have to reinvest the time and redo it. And obviously, if you're in this business, you're expected to do that. But at least we know now we're expected to, not to do that very often and maybe not as drastically. So that definitely, when I was starting, that gave me a little bit more confidence and comfort that that D365 is on this path as far as functionality and also look and feel as well.
Before we wrap up here, I did also just want to congratulate you on new sort of customer win testimonial, kind of a piece that you put together, and I looked through. I actually didn't look through it right before we talked. So, but what I did take away from it, it was interesting to hear. It's always interesting for me to hear from a Dynamics 365, really any of the products, but customers, and hearing them sort of talk about what they needed in an implementation and what worked for them, what didn't, and what I took away from, and we can put a link to this because it's a nice video. Some of them talking about what their needs were, and I think it touches back on what you were saying earlier, which is people really seem to appreciate sort of smaller digestible pieces of information that they can get and learn from, and then go about their job. I think that was the thing that I picked up on, because people were saying that various roles that you had interviewed in this video were really dealing with each of them was dealing with their own challenges working in the company, right? And that was what I got from it anyway.
Yes, and I think, and our website is www.itembyitem.co, and our customer testimonial is there if anybody is interested to go watch it. But you're absolutely right. The primary thing comes down to what I mentioned before, is that most of the time, what we expect from the end users to do is to implement D365FO in addition to their day-to-day jobs. So therefore, it's very important for them to be convenient and be able to go and spend X amount of time. Don't have to think about that I have to now sit down and do training 2 hours. And I think one of the end users, the team leaders, mentioned that in the video, is how convenient it was, and it was really short. And it is also scientifically proven. I mean, there is absolutely science behind the fact that the humans, can actually retain more when they're provided smaller information. It's also, I wrote a blog about this a while back. It's also in the name of magic of number 7. There's also a lot of talk about that we tend to retain information much better if it's less than 7. And that's why you have 7 numbers and a phone number, and then you have 7 colors and things like that. So there's just a lot of things that when you look into it, that human brain works in a way that wants to focus on a small thing, and as soon as you give it a lot of information, the percent of retention goes down. And that they mentioned that this a lot in the video. And I think the other main thing, the theme in the video that they talk about is how easy it is to use. And we provide some YouTube instructions, but really, I mean, just it's super intuitive, so people can easily go find what they're looking for, watch what they're looking for. And one thing that I love about that testimonial, and that's what makes me at least excited about providing this kind of service to our customers, is that, you know, the operations director talks about how it reduced fear of the end users when they come into meetings and when they come to classroom training. They felt comfortable about navigating in D365. They showed each other things, and so it takes a lot of the stigma off of the product itself also. And a lot of people don't feel comfortable to be in a classroom and be pointed out and say, oh, now you go this, and they feel like maybe they're a little bit slow, and they don't want to put themselves out there in front of all of their colleagues and then, you know, look like they're not keeping up. So
yeah, the emotion of it really is a strong component. The emotion and the sort of psychology of learning something new.
Absolutely. I mean, and we're not talking about people that are strangers. You know, you go to a college class, you know, people take a class and they're not emotionally invested in it, and they don't see each other again. You know, they leave and they take another class. It's very, very different for a company who's implementing D365. You know these people. They're your colleagues, and most likely your manager is in there somewhere, and there is that sense of, Lena, who are the superstars?
Mm-hmm.
Who are the really ones that are picking up super quick, and the ones that are not so picking up quick? And you can get in front of that by being prepared. And I think that has a tremendous effect in also the honesty of the process, because if you don't know enough about the tool, you're not going to be able to talk about your concerns. Maybe you're not necessarily happy about the way something is designed, but if you don't understand the background information about that, you're most likely going to be quiet about it until it comes to a point where you're like completely frustrated with it and you say something. But why wait until then, when you can actually get in front of that earlier? So, and that's the part that I love. I mean, I really absolutely love D365FO from the beginning. I'm a huge fan of the product, and I think it has a tremendous future. But I also love the process of learning and just studying adult learning and looking into the new generation and all of these different approaches. And that's what we want to do, is today we deliver it this way. And I want our company to be a pioneer in this area, to look at all of these theories and all of these approaches and find really the best equilibrium to provide the training these projects need.
Excellent. Well, Elif, it's been really interesting getting to hear more of your thoughts on this, and I look forward to being able to continue to collaborate with you and publish some of these diary pieces, which have been a lot of fun as well. So yeah, thanks again for coming on and sharing all this with us.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
This has been another episode of the MSDW Podcast. My thanks to Elif Item for joining me today. If you have any feedback, you can reach me by email, jgumpert@msdynamicsworld.com. Until next time, this is MS Dynamics World, signing off.